Hi everyone, we are back after a bit of a break, and Ben and I tonight are going to talk about Australia's haunted highways, and we're going to cover things like Yowie reports and stories from truck drivers who've had their trucks shaken in the middle of the night when parked in certain areas, UFOs pacing vehicles, min lights, strange silhouettes being seen. Australia's highways are certainly a very spooky place, or they can be. So, Ben, why don't you kick it off with the first story?
Yeah, sure. Look, it's just this. We're going to cover a lot of ground. It really is going to be a very interesting episode. So all the listeners really need to brace themselves for what they're about to experience, and hopefully you're going to hear something that you've not heard before.
Yeah.
So yeah, in researching this episode, I came up with stuff that, wow, I've never heard of that. Wow, I've never heard of that either. So that's the great thing about podcasts, is you get a chance to dig in and find things.
Yeah.
So, and the first one's got a really pretty cool name about it. So we're going to talk about the Pilliga Princess, which is a really lovely name. And this is obviously sort of a ghosty type sort of a story. And the Pilliga Princess is seen along the Newell Highway in New South Wales. And she's supposedly an Aboriginal woman that used to be seen travelling along the Newell Highway between Narrabri and Coonabarabran, and she was often seen hitchhiking between the two towns and getting lifts with truckies. And she was the only Aboriginal person ever seen in the Pilliga, as the Aboriginals believed it to be an evil land. So it was cursed ground that, and they have that around the place for their own reasons, where bad spirits lived. And she apparently did this for many years, going between those two towns, up and down the highway, catching lifts with truckies. So I suppose you can see where this is going to head to. And no one quite knew who she was, but she was famous for travelling that highway if you were in that area. And one night in 1993, the Pilliga Princess was unfortunately struck or hit and killed by a truck who saw her too late as she was wandering across the road.
Mm.
And ever since then, her ghost has reportedly been seen by many, many people travelling along the Newell Highway in New South Wales. Even, this is what I've also have read, that she's even seen pushing the shopping trolley as she used to do. So that would indicate a ghost and a ghostly shopping trolley. I've always wondered about that with ghost reports, how you have implements. You have ghostly implements.
Yes, how does that happen?
It's an interesting, I find that a very interesting concept, that you can have ghostly implements. So,
Yeah.
But apparently it's true. And right up to this very, very day, truckers still will swear that they see her with her trolley at night travelling along the highway.
Yeah.
And it's sort of become one of those really great sort of like urban legends of the Australian highway. And if you happen to be out there broken down along the Newell Highway one night, you might see or hear a shopping cart coming up the gravel verge as
That'd be a
you
bit
sit there
strange.
changing your tyre on the side of the road. This ghostly shopping trolley comes pushing along. So it's an interesting thing, and like with a lot of ghost encounters, or ghosts are tied, or in many cases are tied to places, and tied to and not just tied to places. I think that they're also tied to events, which in some ways perhaps does tie them to places.
Yeah.
So if that's a place where she was obviously familiar in many years walking up and down that road, and she's been struck and killed in that location, then some imprint of her is quite possibly going to be there.
It's quite sad when you think about it, isn't it? You know, that she was known to the locals, but and she unfortunately just had that terrible accident.
Yeah, exactly. And I got on Google Earth and I had a bit of a look at that area, and it's kind of it's got bush either side of the highway, but it does have a kind of a bungalow sort of a feel to it.
A
You know,
bungalow. What's that?
Belangolo sort of a feel to it. If anyone knows what the Belangolo is, Belangolo's state forest where
Ah,
Ivan Blatt was depositing his hitchhikers.
right.
It sort of does have a bit of a Belangolo feel to it. So there is that little bit of a ominousness about that area. That sort of it doesn't. You don't go there and say, "Oh, I'm going to stop and take photos along the Newell Highway because it's so picturesque." It's beautiful.
Yeah.
You don't, it's not an area that you're going to stop in. You're driving through that area like the trucks do, and I'm sure the motorists are just doing the same thing. So there's nothing there of note other than pretty bland sort of bush either side of the highway.
Well, they call it Pilliga Scrub, but it's actually there's the Pilliga National Park. And if you're driving north, it's on the west.
Western side. On the west side, that's correct.
It's large too.
Yeah, it's a big area, and like Belangolo, which is also a big area.
Yeah.
It is a big forest. So
yeah.
So yeah, and like that's pretty much what I've found is just this urban legend part of it. And I haven't got any particular truck driver's testimony or that Bill Smith was driving there in this date and he saw something. I haven't got anything like that. But I think that's the beauty of these sort of stories too, is the fact that they weave themselves into our culture, and I'd never heard of it before, and I thought to myself, is that because I'm a Victorian, and I've never been up to that area, but I've heard a lot of stuff about Australian paranormal, but I'd never ever heard of the Pilliga Princess.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, I know there's a lot goes on in the Pilliga, and
Right.
being near the national park there, the scrub. If it's the scrub, being in the national park, it's also, I mean, you would expect to see that there'd be a lot of Yowie reports too. And,
yes.
And that's what I wanted to talk about next, was where it's a location where a man who is known only as Bongo, claims to have seen a horrific Yowie. And he said his hair turned white after the experience in a matter of minutes, and that he spent the next 20 years in a mental institution after the trauma. Which I think is, wow, that's like what?
That is like what?
Yeah, I could imagine if you're describing that sort of area as, how could I say it? Haunting.
Haunted, yeah, a haunted location.
Yeah, or looking haunting, which places do as well. Yeah. I mean, I could understand. And I would expect, with that large national park, if you're going to see a Yowie, you'd see one close to there too.
Yeah.
But there's people have reported min lights in that area as well. Yeah. And some drivers have claimed to seen a light that floats above the horizon and follows them across the land. And a traveller through the area thought he was approaching another vehicle on a long, flat stretch of road. And when he looked again, the headlights were gone. And yet there were no exits on that stretch of road, just trees on both sides.
Yeah.
So you've got to wonder where that sort of, where that goes, where those lights go.
Exactly. And even if you're going to turn down a woodcutter's track at night time, that you've got to slow down and put the brakes on and really hunt for those wood tracks. It's not something you can just quickly zip into. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, apparently there weren't even any there. But, like truckers, I've known a couple of truckers over the years, and they're pretty, they're pretty tough people.
Yeah.
But even those who've heard the legends of strange things in that area, they won't stay in that area overnight.
No, you don't pull up on the side of the road with your rig and sleep.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, it kind of gives you the chills, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
Thinking about these sort of locations. So which if there's other phenomena there as well, then it's what does that say? It's a area that's is it a ley line area, or is there any type of things like that? I haven't researched that fully, but maybe it's a watch this space, and if anyone's got any stories from out that way, certainly by all means let us know, because I'm always fascinated in multi-phenomena in areas, lights traveling around and shopping carts on highways. It's all very, very
carts on highways.
Yeah, it's all very interesting.
It is. But there are other things, like I just briefly touched on before, about lights pacing vehicles, and over the years many witnesses have reported to me that in the early hours of the morning, and in one particular area is driving on the Bruce Highway between Brisbane and the Sunshine Coast, so going north from Brisbane to the Sunshine Coast, where strange lights have appeared behind them, travelling silently. And they'll say things like, this light, I didn't hear anything, but this light just lights up my car, and I look in the rear view mirror and here's this light pacing me. And they can do that for a few minutes or for half an hour, and then all of a sudden the light changes and it'll lift up and just disappear into the night, and they haven't got a clue where it's gone to. Yeah.
Amazing, isn't it? And you could go drive that road for a month and nothing happened. Like that's the other thing about this phenomena too. Like it doesn't just occur. You just can't go out there and see it. Like it's there when it's there. And you have to be lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. With all these encounters that we're going to talk about, that's how it is. You could sit out there night after night and probably see nothing. But then that one night, something can happen.
Yeah. So have you had reports like that to you? Like pacing vehicles?
Nothing to me directly. I've not had anyone give me a report like that, of that nature, because most of the ones that I've found are all historical.
Okay.
And there's plenty of those instances, but as we were discussing before, nothing in the modern era. No 2020 brand new car pursued by lights and having radio interference, the car stopping, and nothing like that in what I would call the modern era. A lot of these sort of cases are occurring in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So, and you can perhaps to the 50s and up to the 90s a little bit, but that seems to be the golden decades of what I would call, motor vehicle interference cases.
Strangeness.
Strangeness, that's correct. And I was all too young, unfortunately, in that era.
I had quite a lot of reports in the 90s, because there was a lot going on at that time, with UFO reports, but people were reporting a lot of other things, apparitions appearing. They'd be standing on the side of the road and they'd be waiting for this light to come so they could cross it, and then the light would just sort of come down, and it wouldn't be a vehicle, it'd just be a light that just went past them, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of strange stuff going on like that.
Yeah, and I'm sort of just doing a little bit of research for this episode, I found that Tasmania and South Australia have got a fairly large amount of vehicle stopping cases. So we're talking about haunted highways, we're talking about this thing. So UFOs stopping cars on highways, to me, that is a haunted highway. So, you're out there and there's paranormal activity occurring when you're on the highway, whether that's a ghost, whether that's a Yowie, whether that's a UFO. It's a haunted highway when you have got these incidences occurring. And when you've got physical effects happening on vehicles, and there is just so many reports.
Yeah.
It's very common in many ways. Like you look through the decades and even with certain periods of time, like the early 1970s was a major flap. A lot of stuff happening in the early 1970s, a lot of stuff happening in the mid 60s, into the 80s. So they were times when there was what you'd call genuine UFO flap times during those years. And that's reflected in the car stopping cases.
Yeah.
So
actually I had a case that it wasn't to do with the car stopping, but it was another one of those lights pacing the vehicle. And this was from a guy who was in his truck, and he was driving between Rainbow Bay and Gympie, and a motorcycle, or what he thought was a motorcycle, came up close behind him and sort of dogged him for a bit.
Yeah.
And then it came around and it shot up over the trees. And when the motorbike shot up over the trees, the driver actually thought that somehow the motorbike had flown up into the trees and stopped to have a look. But of course, it wasn't a motorbike, was it? So
No.
what that was that a UFO? Was it a strange, odd light that was an apparition or something? I don't know. Couldn't tell you.
No, that's right. Yeah, it's because obviously motorbikes do not behave in that type of a manner.
No, and there's no noise. And obviously they don't go up into trees. So yes.
No, that's right. No, especially with the riders still attached.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, but like as I said, like I've probably got 20 or 30 of them. Like literally that many of these sort of reports. They're just everywhere. And we can even talk about a couple of train cases as well.
Yeah, do.
I'll hit everybody with the train cases, because I find train cases particularly interesting, because a train is a fairly heavy object, and what's a very heavy object. And train stoppages is interesting outside of union disputes. So April 28th, 1954. And in 1954, you talk about flying saucers. You're not talking UFOs, certainly not UAPs.
No.
So on the 28th of April, 1954, a flying saucer almost stopped the Geelong Ararat goods train at 6 a.m. The object dived directly at the locomotive, and the driver and fireman first noticed the object when it was 4 miles away. And it looked dark purple in colour, and it was diving and banking. Then it remained stationary for 90 seconds, and this enabled the men to see that it was perfectly around. This object was a sphere. And the dark mass then suddenly screamed down at the train and swooped up again. It came down at close range and swooped up over the train. I can just see it happening. And it hovered over them like a huge monster, is how the train driver, whose name was Mr. E. Smith, described it. It hovered over us like a huge monster. This is a train driver telling you this. So this is not little ball. This is something that dwarfs the train. And he said it was unlike anything he'd ever seen before. And train drivers, they spend hours out in the lonely location. So this was obviously a significant story. And it came down to within 300 feet of them, and the driver felt like the object was under intelligent control, that it was actually being driven by somebody or something. And after plunging down, it rose higher and higher until it went out of sight. So it was kind of like this train's travelling along. They've slowed the train down as this object's approached, and it's come down and it's basically swooped down low over the train and moved on. So, and this is in 1954. So this is a very, very long time ago in many respects. It's not a recent case by any means. So
sorry, Ben, it's got out of my head. Where was that?
That was between Geelong and Ararat. So that's basically over in Western Victoria. So Geelong's the second largest. It's the second largest city or town in Victoria, and Ararat's famous for the criminally insane hospital that was out there for many, many years. So is
that a flat area? Because they saw it 4 miles away.
Yes, very flat. Western Victoria, you can describe as being very flat and windswept. Is my assessment of that area. And I have been on the train from Adelaide to Melbourne, and the scenery is interesting until you get to about Murray Bridge, and after that it's just flat plains basically all the way into Melbourne. So I could quite easily understand that they would have had a pretty good view anywhere out along that trail. In January 1985. So we're leaping up from 54 to 1985. Don't have a lot of information, but I did find this information. 2 train drivers claimed that they were followed across the Nullarbor plain by a mysterious object. Now, this one, they said that it drained their train of power, bringing it to a halt.
Wow.
Now, you're never going to, and that's the only information I've got. But it's actually stopped the train. So you talk about like the Knowles family's car getting, and there's a lot of stories like that too. That is not the only case. That is more common than you'd realise. This is a train that's been stopped on the Nullarbor plain by an object. It's drained of its power, is their words. So what's it take to stop a diesel? I'm assuming it's a diesel locomotive from travelling across the Nullarbor plain. So, and the other thing about train cases too is that A, I don't know a lot of them, right? B, it's probably an uninvestigated area. Like, can you FOI train reports and train records? Like, and has anyone bothered to do that?
Yeah,
there could be, in the state railway archives and files, if they haven't had a big clean out and thrown them all out, there could be a lot of UFO reports.
Yeah. Actually, that reminds me, on the Strange Encounters Facebook page, I think I've put a link to, there was a show called Australian Railways. And on there, out of the blue, it was just all about trains and travelling and, what the train drivers go through, long hauls, all this sort of stuff. Out of the blue, the train driver starts talking about seeing a UFO while he's out in the middle of God knows where. And I thought, well, gosh, you just never know. And that ties in with what you're saying. There's got to be a lot of those reports with train drivers. I mean, I know we're not on the haunted highways topic here, but
yeah.
These are like desolate, not desolate, but what am I thinking of? Locations that are out away from civilization, basically, going through these long tracks of and he too said they saw it quite a distance away too, because it was very flat where they were driving the train.
Yeah.
So, there's got to be something, but do they report it? Who do they report to?
Exactly. Yeah. Does it get reported? It may not get reported. It can be just lost, Yeah. And without deviating too far from topic, it's the same with like the private airlines. Like, what UFO records does Qantas have? They must have files and files of UFO reports from pilots.
I don't know. Do you think pilots actually report it?
Well, you'd think they would report some encounters, wouldn't you? I know it's all bad for your career and everyone thinks you're loopy, but there's got to be instances that have been reported. But unlike the governments, the private companies don't have to give you a squat.
That's true. Yeah.
You can't FOI Qantas.
Yeah.
But we.
Well, anyway,
But we should get back to the highways.
I was going to say, let's get back out of the scrub and out of the air and back onto the highways. Sorry, people, but actually, before we go off that topic, if anyone knows about any reports from train drivers or who've seen UFOs, we would both love to hear about that.
Absolutely.
And if you know if they've been reported or who they're reported to, we would love to know that too. So please put it in the comments below.
Please do.
Yes. So I'm just going to talk briefly about the lady in black at the Mount Victoria Pass in Lithgow in New South Wales. I don't have a huge amount of information on this. I didn't go into it deeply, but according to legend, this strip of highway at Mount Victoria Pass is haunted by a rather nasty spectre, which is the lady in black. So the story goes that since the mid-19th century, travellers have spoken of a mournful figure dressed in black that clings to the back of vehicles. I mean, could you imagine just driving along and seeing something, an apparition clinging to the back of a vehicle while you're driving behind it?
Wow.
And, I'd be thinking giant spider or something. It's Australia. We're talking Australia. Everything's big here.
Everything wants to kill you.
Yep. But anyway, travellers have spoken of a mournful figure dressed in black. I said that. Anyway, clinging to the vehicles, but causing drivers to plummet to a fiery death. And apparently this being was immortalised in Henry Lawson's poem, The Ghost at the Second Bridge. And the phantom is believed to be that of a real person, which is Carolyn Collitz, a local woman from the Hartley Valley whose beaten and battered body was found beside the road in 1842.
Back in the day.
Back in the day. Yeah. I don't know if you've got any more information on that.
Look, I did do a little bit of research into that, and it's a very interesting case. And I think there's actually that obviously that Mount Victoria Pass, and I got onto Google Maps and I had a look at it, and there's photos of it sort of back in the day, and then when you look at it today, it looks sort of a lot different. When you look at that pass area, it's still a long hill and it winds down, and and it still sort of looks like that. But I haven't heard of any modern sort of reports. But I suppose like our Pilliga Princess, that it could probably happen at any time.
Yep.
So it really is what's known as an eerie pass. So, and I'm assuming that most of these encounters are basically happening at night rather than a daytime sort of encounters. But the road twists and turns, and it's known for black ice. So it's kind of it is a very dangerous sort of an area up in that part of the world. If you're driving up there, and some of our listeners may know that area and have been through it. When I got on there and had a really good look about it, I thought, I would love to go up there and have a look. So same with all of these areas, like just to actually get there on the ground, would be really, really good. So I've got a lot of stuff, but if I go through it, we're probably going to start pushing our time a little bit.
Oh, that's okay. Will you go on to the Wakehurst Parkway in Sydney?
Yeah. So we'll move on to the Wakehurst Parkway. Now, the Wakehurst Parkway.
Drum roll, please.
So if you live in Sydney, you probably know where this is. And for those of us who don't live in Sydney, it's the Wakehurst Parkway is a roadway in French's Forest, which is about 26 kilometres from the Sydney CBD to the north, I believe. And it's a 14.6 kilometre road that runs from Narrabeen to Seaforth. And it has been the site of murder and a decaying body, and where discarded items were found that belonged to a murdered boy. The road is also where two ghosts are said to haunt. And it's unfortunately well known for its fatal crashes and creepy atmosphere. We love a creepy atmosphere on this show, as the road always has a dark history of being a dumping ground for Sydney murder victims in that area. So in 1995, the body of Francis Tizzoni, 21, was found dumped off Wakehurst Parkway at French's Forest, with a post-mortem revealing that the Macquarie University student had been strangled or suffocated. And in 1994, at Deep Creek Reserve, Stephen Dempsey was fatally shot by a high-powered compound bow and then dismembered. That's quite a well-known incident.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Chopped to pieces.
He was chopped to pieces and wrapped in glad wrap, I believe, as well. And in 1960, the belongings of Graham Thorne, 8 years old, were found on the side of the road, and the boy's body was later found in Seaforth. So you can see where we're going here, people. This is an area where there has been death, misery, and lives cut short. So, and there are said to be two ghosts on the Wakehurst Parkway, with the sightings of the first ones beginning about 40 to 50 years ago. And it's a woman in her 20s or in her 30s who dresses in period clothing from the 1800s, and also a separate ghost sighted of a female aged in her late teens or early 20s with distinctive eyes and wearing a light-coloured hippie-style dress. So these ghosts have been seen several times along the parkway. Witnesses unknown to each other have given the same description of the young female, and the sightings of her along the Wakehurst Parkway began in the early 2000s. And this is the ghost is known as Kelly. And at night, some motorists see Kelly on the side of the road, and realising that they've passed a woman alone in the dark, they look in the rearview mirror to try and spot her. Suddenly, that spirit is in the back of their car, and they can see her distinctive eyes close up in the mirror. And upon turning around, she's not there. She's gone. So that's interesting. And there's a cab driver in Sydney who's Burmese. His name is Hurle, and he also shared a chilling account of an experience that he had back in 2010, when he claimed he saw a grey silhouette of a thin young woman sitting on the rear seat of his car. She was in a kind of white gown and headdress like a Christian nun. and I couldn't really see her face, he said. Just the shape of her face and her deep green eyes. Yes, the sad green eyes. But she was definitely real and sitting there staring back at me at that precise moment. I slammed on the brakes hard, and he claimed on a separate night he picked up a female passenger he had driven before who asked to be taken to the same spot where the apparition appeared. He later discovered that the female passenger had died a few weeks earlier. And another drivers have described picking up a blood-covered girl on the parkway and taking her to the hospital, only to have her suddenly disappear. And some have recounted car electricals, such as windscreen wipers going haywire along the route, or simply feel like they've driven into an eerie twilight zone. So one man reported that he'd heard a lady or a girl screaming, help me, from the bushes when he stopped on the road. And the road was built in 1939. So if you're out there in Sydney and you want to go travel the Wakehurst Parkway, please do. You may well have an encounter.
Eek. But I was just thinking while you were talking, I think I've put couple of, because there are those stories of I read another story of where a lot of people had also reported seeing a female in a long white dress on the road. But
Yep.
you know, there are stories of those sort of sightings in almost every state of Australia.
Yes.
And I think that I put a couple of those stories on the Facebook page as well. So if you're people watching, if you go to the Strange Encounters Downunder Facebook page, you'll be able to scroll through there back. I mean, there's so much information on that page we've put on there over the years of those sorts of stories. But I was going to ask you, Ben, I mean, it's, you know, I could see how skeptics would say, oh, this is just like urban legends and etc., and just sort of discard it. But, you know, I think it's a little bit too coincidental that many different people report similar things occurring in that area.
Yeah, exactly. And these are the only ones that get reported.
Yeah.
You know, so again, that disparity between what happens and what's actually reported.
Yeah.
You know, so it could be a much higher rate of incident that's happening than actually, you know. But you've obviously got to be there at the right time as well. You know, like I said, I could drive up and down the Parkhurst way and not have anything happen.
Yeah.
You know, so it just, and it might get back to your own sensitivity as well.
I think
Maybe it's for people who are awake with that type of sensitivity rather than people who don't have that particular gift as well. But it just also reminds me of a work colleague of mine who I worked with a few years ago told me a highway ghost encounter. And this was just this is up where I live, just out of the town of Orbost, which is east of Bairnsdale here, about an hour away. And she said one summer's night, her mum, her and her sister, that they were kids at the time. She said they would have been probably about 12 or around that age. And they were driving along at a particular area, and it was a summer night, and they'd left a friend's place going home. And they turned around, they came around a corner on a perfectly clear night, and all of a sudden there was this a fog patch on the road. And as they drove towards the fog patch, they saw a woman floating above the ground in a white nightie, or a white night dress, I suppose, something like that. And she had her arms out to the side like that. And she was floating about 2 feet off the road. And as they drove past, the mother said, this is classic, "What a strange time to be hitchhiking."
Isn't that classic?
That's classic. And they just kept on driving home.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, so roughly show me where it happened. And I sort of got on Google Maps, because I'm a Google Maps hound. And we got on there and I found it. And sure enough, where the encounter occurred, in the paddock next to it, is the remains or the footings of an old house. Mm-hmm. So directly where the ghost appeared, across from that is the footings of an old house. So the concrete, and you can see it on Google Maps too. Just the foundation is the right word. the concrete foundations of an old house that had used to be there in the past. And I thought to myself, well, that's really, really interesting that they had that encounter, and there is a archaeological something in that area that suggests that there was originally a house at that location. So this could have been a previous resident who was there.
Amazing, yeah.
Yeah, and it's a great haunted highway ghost story, because it is the Princess Highway. So
yeah. Wow. Well, I've got a story a friend told me as well.
Yeah.
Which is of sightings of a mystery black stallion at Diamond Creek, an hour north of Melbourne. Now, this friend of mine used to live there, and it was known in the area. And I said, when I was talking to you before, you said you hadn't heard of it, I think. Yeah, and I hadn't heard of this before, but anyway, apparently was. They would drive home at night, and she said you would only ever see this stallion in the middle of the night. It would always be in the middle of the road, rearing up in your headlights and making you swerve and give you a heart attack. And she said it was probably just a wild horse, possibly, but there were lots of non-wild horses in the area. But this one had an air of mystery because it was black, and you never saw it until you were at the point where you had to swerve to avoid hitting it, even if you had the high beams on. But you would only ever see it when it was in the middle of the road, which is interesting to me.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
And does that suggest that the horse was killed on the road, perhaps?
It could have been, it could have been that something like that, I don't know. I always try and look for other explanations. I'm a little bit, and I'm not a skeptic, but I'm pragmatic. I like to sort of look at, well, what other possibilities could explain these things.
Yeah.
But to only ever see it in the middle of the road.
Yeah.
Interesting. Put it that way.
Yeah, that's interesting. And the first thing that comes to mind for me is that fact that, well, maybe that was the impact point for a horse being killed in that location at some point in time in the last 200 years.
Yeah, could have been something like that. Do you know that area, Diamond Creek?
Yeah. Well, it's not near me, but yeah, I do. I do know approximately where it is. Yeah,
okay. Have you been through that area? Is it a little bit spooky?
It's kind of it's sort of on the outer fringes there. So yeah, and I have heard of other cases sort of out in that northern area of Melbourne where there's things like figures appearing on roads out that way, like a white figure appearing on the road, like of indeterminate sex.
Yeah.
So and lights out that way following people around out there too. So yeah, I have. Yes. So yeah, it's not surprising to hear something like that coming up.
Yeah. You've just reminded me, because years ago I used to do a lot of driving between Brisbane and Orange in New South Wales, west of Sydney, and Brisbane and Adelaide. And thank goodness I don't do that anymore. But I do remember a couple of times when we were driving, and there would be someone walking along the side of the road of the highway, out in the middle of nowhere. And I'm just thinking now, I always thought they were a real person, but then I'm thinking, what the heck are they doing out here in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the night, especially along that Hay Plain area in South Wales? It's like a long straight road for miles and miles. And where do they come from? So I'm second guessing what I originally thought, that they were real people, alive, living people.
You may have seen ghosts, because a ghost on the side of the highway can appear to be as solid as you or I.
Yes. Yeah.
And there's lots of stories of people pulling up on highways, picking up hitchhikers, and then the hitchhiker not being there. That's a classic ghost story, isn't it? When we'll drop you off now. Oh no, he's not in the back. So
where did they go?
Where did he go to? So that's a very, very common thread, isn't it? So I just happened to scroll through my notes, because I was just talking, just going backwards a little bit for the lady in black, because I knew I had a fair bit of stuff, and you'd already explained a bit of it, and I couldn't find that
Yeah.
stop point.
Yeah.
What you had explained and other stuff. So one encounter was described. This is the lady in black. This
Is this the one at Lithgow?
Lithgow, Victoria Pass. Just rewinding a little bit, guys.
Mm.
One encounter was described. The witness had actually driven through the ghost. The ghost had been on the road, and they had driven through the ghost. It was a dark night, and she recalls the shadow materialized in the middle of the road, coming up towards her in the front of the car. And I imagine it's almost like the horse. So, at that point of, I'm going to hit something here. And at the time, there were no distinguishing features that stood out. The ghostly shadow simply vanished into the rearview mirror. It was a chilling experience, one that was never forgotten. And this isn't the only account of sightings by locals. She is seen more often in winter than in summer.
That's interesting.
And truck drivers and motorists as well claim to see her at night when the frigid temperatures and the black ice forces them to slow down. So this is during the winter months. And in the 1800s, going back in time, travellers reported that their horses would become spooked and often restless as they approached the viaduct that's in that location. So interesting that she may be seasonal.
Yeah.
And, or maybe the fact that you're going slower, maybe that comes into it. I don't know. It could be any number of possible possibilities. That's the case for the lady in black from Victoria Pass, Lithgow, New South Wales, Australia.
You're making me think that about seasonal viewings of these unusual things, and I'm thinking about Min Min lights, because I know in the book called Min Min Lights by Maureen Kozika, she's the only person who's ever written a book only about Min Min lights. And she travelled through Queensland, because up here they're well known around the Boulia area in central Queensland.
Yeah.
But she found from the locals, they would often say that the Min Min lights were more often seen after they'd had a rainy season. And after that was finished, that's when you would see the Min Min lights. This is what she had in her notes. So
yeah,
I'm just wondering, because then you start to think, well, what could create that? Why would that happen? Because I do know other people have reported lights pacing their vehicles on highways, and the difference between UFOs and Min Min lights is the Min Min lights are only sort of just above treetop level, where if the UFOs could be way up high in the atmosphere.
Yeah.
And the Min Min lights sort of respond to your vehicle, or if you get stopped, get out and walk towards them. They'll back away, and if you walk back, they'll come towards you. All that sort of stuff, that.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering about the seasonality of some of these phenomena.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. It can be seasonally orientated. It can be date orientated, as in the date that they were killed, or that type of stuff. Anniversaries. So seasonal and anniversaries sort of tend to, you saw the ghost on the road, and then you stopped in at the local hotel, and they said, "Oh, this was the day, 50 years ago today that old Black Mary was killed out on the road." So that's kind of almost the classic ghost story, but it does seem to have some basis in fact.
That's really interesting, because now I'm thinking about the Roswell crash, and I'm thinking, now, did anyone sort of take note of how many UFOs were seen on the anniversary, 24th of June, like that, I think it was 24th of June, like every year. Are there more UFO reports around that time? That's an interesting sort of thing to think about too.
It is, absolutely, yeah. No, I think there is seasonality to the paranormal, yes.
It could
110%, and Min Mins particularly.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. They are particularly influenced by time of year.
Yeah.
Even months, I think, even particular months, if you go through UFO statistics, certain months have got higher UFO incidences than others.
Yeah.
So,
just to take a little turn off of that weirdo stuff. Well, this is sort of weird too. Is weirdo high strangeness? Well, this is high strangeness.
Yes.
Is the Gravity Hills, and I'm bringing this up because some years ago we went. I knew about the Gravity Hill at near Moonbi, north of Moonby it is, in New South Wales, and it's right on the highway. There's a little side, there's like, a double lane highway this way and one in the opposite direction, and off between the highway at a particular point, there is an adjoining little single road, and it's only about, I don't know, 50, 75 metres long between the two highways, 50 metres long between the two highways. And off to the northern highway, there's another road that goes sort of like around the corner. Anyway, we were driving there, and we were going to somewhere south, and we thought, well, we've got to stop and look at that as we go. And we nearly overshot it, but we pulled off on the highway, really quickly. And lo and behold, we got out and we're doing this, like I'm holding my arm out like this and trying to make sure that it's where the car is sort of going up the hill, that the highway is not, the northern highway is not higher than the southern highway, and all that sort of stuff, I was pouring water on the road to see if it would trickle down the road, and we had a plastic ball, put that on the road, but the road was a bit too gravelly and it wouldn't, this adjoining road was too gravelly and it wouldn't roll. So I couldn't do that. And so at some stage we want to go back there and use a light level.
Yep.
Anyway, but we did on the little road that was off of the northern highway. We just parked the car there. And there's a little video. I'll see if we can put it in this and show you, but it's actually Barry sitting in the Land Cruiser, and he's talking about what he's doing, which is putting the car in neutral. The car's on, but it's in neutral, takes the handbrake off, and lo and behold, the car goes backwards and then it goes up like that. It's a great clip. It's a really good clip, and we have to go back. But there are some, this is just one of those other strange things that are related to highway situations.
Yes, exactly. And there's also one in Victoria, and it's called Straws Lane, and it's in Wood End. So if you know Wood End is near Picking. I say picnic at Hanging Rock. It just comes out. It's near Hanging Rock, so in that location in sort of central Victoria, Wood End. And all those things that you described go on in that location. The car goes uphill, the water rolls uphill, your ping pong ball rolls uphill. And I got on Google Maps, right, because as I always do, and I pulled up Straws Lane, Wood End, and I Google Map walked the road. And sure enough, when you walk up that road, and it's just a lane, a road, there's no reason to be there, there's people parked on the side of the road. And I can guarantee you the only reason they are there is because they are probably doing those very little science experiments in that location at Straws Lane. If you hop on Google Maps and type in Straws Lane, Wood End, you'll see people standing on the side of the road. And to me, I reckon they're doing those because there's no reason to stop there.
Yeah.
It's not a place that you would stop.
No, same with this other place near Moonby. You wouldn't stop there. There's no reason to. Yeah.
There's another one at Bowen, apparently, Bowen Mountain in New South Wales, and Moonby in New South Wales.
Yeah, that's the one I was talking about, yeah.
Yeah, near Tamworth, and Uru in South Australia. So there's, 5 or 6 of these locations around Australia where there are anomalies.
Yeah.
Like what you would call, gravitational anomalies.
Yeah, like a gravity well, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. So... And of course, these things are always miles from where I live. So I haven't had a chance to go there myself. You've had the pleasure of going there and testing one for yourself, which is fantastic. And next time I'm up that way, I'll try and do it myself to test the one in Victoria and do a video on that as well.
Yeah, that'd be great, actually. Yeah. So there you have it, folks. There's our Australia's haunted highways. For this episode. And if you've had experiences, we would love to hear your stories. Please put them in the comments, and do visit our Facebook page so that we can, and have a look what we've got on there. And this video will also I'll post a link on the Facebook page, but it will go up on the YouTube channel too. So that link on Facebook will take you straight there. Remember to, if you liked it, give it a like, give it a thumbs up on YouTube and on Facebook, and And remember to subscribe as well and tap that bell to make sure you get notifications when we upload our videos.
Absolutely. And spread the word amongst friends, family, colleagues, and associates.
Yes.
So that other people can enjoy our musings and chats as we get episodes together.
Yeah, and do go and have a look if you do have a Facebook account. Do have a look on the page because there are a lot of interesting stories on there. I was just having a look again recently last week, and I'm thinking, wow, because it's been running for 7 or 8 years now, and it's just full of stories of Australian strangeness, strange encounters down under.
Yes.
Okay, so until next time, we will be joining Mr. Ben Google Maps King and myself for the next episode in another 2 weeks. So we will see you then.
We'll see you then.
Bye for now.